Thank you, Director Haynes. And again, this is a critically important time for not only those of us on the committee, but the public at large to see the intelligence community leadership. I personally believe the value of 702, but we're going to have to lean in on being willing to have the same kind of courage of declassification that we showed in advance of Putin's invasion of Ukraine to make the case to the American public, and for that matter, to skeptical members of Congress in terms of how this is not simply used as an anti-terrorism tool, but also in terms of our competition with Russia and China. I'm going to take my time and come back to the question, the changing nature of national security. I made comments that national security today is different than it was in 1993 or 2003. At that moment in time, perhaps relatively simpler times, we looked at our adversaries in terms of how many tanks and planes and guns they might have. Increasingly, I believe, and I think the vast majority of us on this committee believe, the competition falls into who wins various technology domains. General Nakasone and I were talking before the session today about how then Chairman Burr and I were trying to make the case that Huawei posed a national security threat to American telecom providers and others. It took us years to make that case, and we're still recovering from that activity. I think about more recently, Senator Cornyn and I and others on this committee recognized that we'd fallen far behind in the research, development, and fabrication, the making of semiconductor chips. And again, in a broad bipartisan way, Congress reacted to that. The vast majority of us on this committee think that increasing Chinese use of mobile apps like TikTok, and while we have different approaches, I know the Vice Chairman and I very much believe that the TikTok poses a national security threat, both in terms of data collection and in terms of a potentially enormous propaganda tool. What I would like to hear from all of you, and maybe we'll start with Director Wray, but is do you share at least my assessment that national security has to be redefined in 2023 to recognize that domination of technology domains that on the surface do not appear to have anything to do with national security, artificial intelligence, Director Haynes mentioned biotechnology, quantum computing, who wins the challenge around advanced energy. These are national security issues as well, and we have to do a better job of both convincing the public and, quite honestly, some in the business community. We've made progress on the business community, but many are still, as Senator Rubio made mention, inexorably tied to a global supply chain that relies on cheap Chinese goods. How do we make that case? But do you start with accepting the premise that national security has to include who wins each of these technology domains? And I'll just go right down the line.
Well, certainly, Mr. Chairman, I wholeheartedly agree that technology and economic security have become inextricably intertwined with national security. And the efforts this committee has made and that a lot of us in the intelligence community have made to engage the private sector, I think, are essential to that, and we just have to keep doubling down on that. You could just look at, for example, on the cyber side, our critical infrastructure is in 85% of it or something is in the hands of the private sector. And if you look at our innovation, if you look at our PII, our personally identifiable information, the percentage is even higher. And if you look at what the Chinese are trying to steal, that's where it is. So we need to be working more and more closely with the business community to try to build resilience. I think there have been a lot of progress that's been made, but we need to make more.
General?
Chairman, I certainly agree on the statement with regards to the changing nature of power, and I think that's where the National Security Agency has always found itself in being able to hardwired to look for what's the next technology we should be chasing, being able to leverage a workforce that is very, very heavily inculcated with science, technology, engineering, mathematics. But I think the big piece that at least I've learned over the past several years is the fact that it's all about partnerships. It's the partnerships that we have here in the IC. It's the partnerships with the public sector. It's the partnerships that we have to develop that will give us the competitive advantage as we look at this new changing character.
Director Haynes?
Yeah, absolutely agree, obviously, with my colleagues. And I mean, I think one of the things that we have been learning in the intelligence community, exactly as General Nakasone indicated, is our work with the private sector in this space is particularly important. As you know, over my lifetime, I have seen increasingly the innovation of critical foundational technologies occurring in the context of the private sector, and our capacity to work with them to understand essentially what those innovations are and how we can help them protect themselves in this context is another aspect of this that has to be focused on and something we spend a lot of time on.
Director?
No, Mr. Chairman, I fully agree. I think the revolution in technology is not only the main arena for competition with the People's Republic of China, it's also the main determinant of our future as an intelligence service as well. As you know, we've undertaken a number of innovations over the last couple of years to strengthen our capacity on that revolution in technology. For the first time, appointing a chief technology officer, for the first time establishing a CIA-wide technology strategy, creating a new mission center focused largely on technology, and as my colleagues emphasized, building better partnerships, stronger partnerships with the private sector as well as with academia, creating a technology fellows program, because we have to be more flexible in our employment practices as well to attract people who are accomplished in the private sector and the tech sector who may be interested in a couple of years of public service as well. And we're deeply interested in trying to attract those kind of people as well. And then finally, I absolutely agree on the importance of partnerships, not just across the intelligence community, but with others in the executive branch. So as you know, we're working closely with the Department of Commerce and their CHIPS Implementation Act office as well to provide the kind of direct support that I think is essential to that effort as well.
General?
Chairman, I completely agree with the statement. You went back to 1993. I'll go back to 1984. When I came in the Army in 1984, we own the technology. The West owned the technology. We won the Cold War, and then I think we took our eye off that ball. So now it's about how do we apply this asymmetric advantage that we have in this partnership of folks sitting at this table right now who work so closely together to try and defend our nation. Like the other agencies, DIA has hired the right people at the right time to get into this, to try and understand it and make an impact for the Department of Defense.
And I'm over time, but my only closing comment is that does mean we may need to redirect some of the resources. I mean, the idea of China's extraction of cobalt out of the DRC and how they're going to get it back to China becomes a national security issue. The question of China flooding the zone on standard-setting bodies to define the next technology rules for beyond 5G to kind of ORAN, Open Radio Access Networks, next generation wireless, is a national security concern. You know, who's leading the way on biotech innovation becomes a national security concern. And I think we need to make sure that we are both reporting on this and that we are engaging our private sector partners. Because I agree with Senator Rubio. Too many of our corporate world still believes that that these collaborations inside of China are benign, even though when they turn a blind eye to the literally unprecedented amounts of intellectual property theft, too often because they're making way too much money on investing in China tech. Some of that has changed, but this is an ongoing challenge.